Trying to land every finance internship or job at once is like walking into a restaurant and ordering everything on the menu. You'll end up full, broke, and unsatisfied. Instead, here's how to pick the 1 to 2 dishes, or in this case, roles, that actually fits your tastes, skills, and brand. When I was applying to internships and full-time jobs out of college, I didn't really have a strong search method to begin with, and I really just wanted to take anything that I could get. I was casting a wide net to not limit my options, really to just see what I could land. I would apply to all sorts of roles, from corporate finance to investment banking to tech finance to even insurance underwriting. Anything that really had finance in the name, just so I could give myself a chance at getting an internship to begin with or a full-time job in any respect, because that's what I needed at the end of the day. Now, it wasn't until I started clarifying what I wanted, what types of roles aligned with my skill set, and what types of roles really meshed well with the personal brand that I have built through college, through my experiences, and that I could kind of tell my story around. It's no surprise that when I applied to these roles that I didn't have a good fit with, like insurance underwriting or corporate finance, that I wasn't really gaining much traction at all. And even when I did land interviews, they never went far because I was never excited about those roles to begin with, and interviews can smell that from a mile away. By the way, if you're still unsure what roles fit you, grab my free application tracker in the description below. It forces you to clarify lanes instead of scattering applications. However, when I finally defined my personal brand, how I was portraying myself to the market, to recruiters, to employers, I figured out that I wanted my brand to be about having interpersonal skills, being a people person, and then also having a technical background in finance and in the markets and in investing. Those 2 key components really led me to think, hey, I want to be in a front office role, which a lot of students do, right? If you're looking to get into high finance, you don't want to be in the back in operations or back office, middle office, crunching numbers and processing trades and doing paperwork. Everybody really wants to be in front of clients, traveling, all the glitz and the glam and everything that's put on a pedestal, but nobody is really willing to define their personal brand as such, right? People will say they want to be in a front office role, but then have no experience on their resume or not even be a charismatic people person in an interview. So how can you expect to tell a recruiter that you have all this technical finance knowledge and investment strategy and equity research and no people skills, and ask them to put you in front of clients by applying to a front office role? That's just not how it works. They would have no evidence or indication of your potential that later on in your trajectory, you could be somebody who would be comfortable in front of clients. That's why if you want to get into a front office role in finance, you have to have both sides of the equation. After understanding this, I started applying to wealth management positions, specifically junior advisor positions, where you would be tasked with getting new clients, building relationships, but also still having some technical financial planning knowledge in order to best serve your clients. And believe it or not, I started hearing back and getting more interviews. The way I did this wasn't just by applying to those roles because I was a better fit. I organized my resume, having entrepreneurial type experiences near the top of my resume with leadership roles in my finance organization to really build the story and craft the narrative that I am somebody who will go out there, get clients, build relationships with people, and also have the ability and understanding to hold conversations about the markets. On top of that, I would network with local RIAs and wealth management shops in order to get my name out there. And if you think about it, by networking with people and having coffee chats and showing up strong here, making a good first impression, being very professional, coming well prepared with good questions, and being polished in general shows you that I'm prepared to be client facing. And even before an interview, this is how I show up. So getting back to the topic at hand, you're probably still wondering, hey, shouldn't I be applying to every role that I can to maximize my chances? And I think if you're talking about getting an internship or a job out of college 5-10 years ago, you'd be correct. But in today's market, that strategy just doesn't bear fruit. You're wasting applications on roles you weren't built for. This may be unconventional advice, but why apply to accounting or operations or supply chain roles if you really want to be in high finance? It's common to hear people saying, oh yeah, just get in the door in supply chain or operations or corporate finance at your dream company, at JP Morgan, just so you can get your foot in the door, because from there, it's easier to make a lateral transfer. And while I do agree with that to some extent, I strongly believe that as a student in university, there is no greater time to market your potential rather than marketing your skills and your experience that you've acquired through years of work. If you do start out in a back office role or a role at a company that you don't really want, but you're just there so then you can get into your dream role in the future, you're still going to end up spending a couple years' time plus some networking in order to make that transition. And I think a better use of your time as a student, rather than applying to a million different roles all at this one company that you want to get into and taking interviews no matter what position it is just to try to get a foot in the door, instead define the role that you really want, no matter if it's at this dream company or at a different company, and try to find your way into that role wherever you can. Now, it may seem like there's only a handful of high finance roles at the bulge bracket banks, and that's the case, that is true, but there are even smaller boutiques or middle market places, regional banks that you can take advantage of similar roles, and they're not as highly coveted and sought after because students don't know where to look, and they don't think of those smaller shops as viable options because they want the flashy name brand appeal of a bulge bracket bank. And another point on this is that employers can just smell generic applications. If you're applying to hundreds or thousands of jobs, it's likely that you're using the same resume for everything. And in that case, it doesn't make sense that a recruiter would pick you for a supply chain role if your resume really speaks to a finance position. So if you're wondering why you're not hearing back from all of these random applications, it's pretty clear to me that your whole application does not align with the role. And that doesn't just mean your resume, I also mean your network, who you've been talking to, because if you're applying to hundreds or thousands of jobs, there's no shot you have time to do the proper networking with people in the company, in the division that you're applying to, or that you have talked to all of the recruiters for all of the roles that you're applying to. And I get that it takes time to do that, but it also takes time to apply to 20 different random applications. And so rather than spending that time filling out the same information that I already uploaded on my resume in the Workday forms, I'd rather spend that time trying to get in contact with somebody who works at this company that I'm applying to and send one solid application instead of 20 surface level applications. You're probably also wondering, how do I know what roles fit me? And I don't know if I'm here to give you that answer in particular, but it's something that I can help you figure out for yourself. It really comes down to laying out all of the skills that you think you have and all of the experiences that you have on your resume. With those two things in mind, you can start to outline and build your story, build your personal brand. On top of this, you have to have an understanding of what you actually want out of your life, out of your career, rather than just following a path just because everybody else is doing it, or because your parents told you so, or because your professors are pitching one type of career path. And figuring out what you individually want out of your life and your career, something that's gonna have to take place outside of this YouTube video. Either you figuring it out by yourself, or feel free to check out the mentorship program below. And so maybe if I give you an example of how I figured it out for myself, that can give you an idea of where to go. For me, I never saw the value in earning 6 figures just to spend 100-hour work weeks in the office. I never wanted to get into investment banking even though it was the most sought after career by my peers. Most students in my investment fund student organization wanted to go into investment banking because of the flashy titles, the earning potential of getting over six figures right out of college, living in New York, being on Wall Street. All of that was so romanticized by college students at a non-target school. And I'm not saying that path shouldn't be for you. I'm just saying it wasn't for me. I didn't want to make that trade of earning a ton of money, but spending a lot of it on rent in New York, and then also spending most of my time in an office. But I still wanted to be in a front office, client-facing finance role. And the way I found that was figuring out what I like to do, which was building relationships with people, watching them grow, helping them achieve their goals. And doing that in the financial world is exactly financial advising. And since I had experiences on my resume where I actually performed those things that I wanted to do, I didn't necessarily have to have a wealth management position to get a wealth management internship at JP Morgan. It was just that with the experiences that I did have on my resume, I was able to clearly communicate to a recruiter and in my interviews that I was somebody and that I am somebody who can step into that role and paint the picture very clearly for the person across the table. So an action item out of this could be to list your 1 to 2 top skills that you want to pursue and that you want to utilize in your role, and map them to finance careers that value those skills. If you're really great with coding and numbers, and that really leans towards maybe a back office or a quant role, but that's not what you want to do, don't waste your time pursuing roles just because you would be a good fit. And instead, focus your time, energy, and attention on building your story, crafting your narrative around the skills that you do have and that you're still equally as strong in, but that you actually want to use in a career. And finally, what if you choose wrong? I think if you go through this assessment of taking inventory of your skills, your experiences, and really crafting your personal brand of what you want out of a role, you'll have a low likelihood of getting into a role that you're unsatisfied with because you chose the role. And that's a much different angle than most students take when applying to internships or jobs, because they just apply to anything that they can get. And then if you accept a role for a random supply chain or operations internship or job, of course you're gonna think, hey, maybe I chose wrong. And you're probably gonna find that out pretty quickly, because when you go in there every day, you're not going to be aligned with what you actually want out of your life, out of your career. And that's not to say that you can't find some enjoyment in a different industry, and who knows, maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised where you're able to exercise the skills that you wanted to in a different type of industry, and you're completely happy doing so, and maybe you switch paths. But one way to double check this and confirm with yourself before even sending out an application is to have coffee chats. Talk to people who are in the roles that you're going to be applying for, who are in the industries that you're gunning for, and ask them questions that you actually care about, that you actually want to know about. And that will give you a good sense of, do I think I will find my fit in this role? And once you find that fit, double down. Don't be the student applying to everything and hearing nothing. Pick 1 to 2 roles, build momentum there. In this next video, I'll show you how to take that focus and turn it into a powerful internship search strategy. Check it out right here, and let's cook. I'll see you over there.